My stepmother laughed when my father forgot my birthday for the third year in a row, then made a show of buying my stepsister a diamond necklace a week later. I didn't say a word until the will reading, when she found out Dad left everything to me for never treating him like a wallet. I'm Josh, 28 years old, male, and I still remember the exact sound of my stepmother's laugh that night. It wasn't loud, more like this smug little exhale through her nose, but it burned into my head like a brand. My dad had just forgotten my birthday for the third year in a row. We were at the dinner table, empty plates in front of us because she'd already decided to not bother cooking too much tonight. She turned to him and said, "Guess Josh didn't make enough of an impression this year either," then chuckled like it was the most harmless joke in the world. It wasn't harmless. It was calculated. I'd learned that by now. Her name's Carol, 45, all blonde highlights and permanent perfume cloud. She married my dad when I was 15, after my mom passed. At first, I wanted to believe she was trying. I mean, she bought me a hoodie once, cheered at my basketball game. But the thing about Carol is, she never does anything without an audience. When no one's watching, you're either invisible or inconvenient. A week after my forgotten birthday, she proved it again. We were at this jewelry store. Well, they were. I'd been dragged along under the guise of family time. She made this big production about how her daughter, Chloe, my stepsister, 21, deserved something special for making the dean's list. Dad pulled out his card for a diamond necklace that cost more than my car. Chloe squealed. Carol beamed, and I just stood there thinking, you couldn't remember my birthday, but you can remember the carat weight on a necklace. The weird part is, I didn't say anything. Not then. Not the next day. Not for months. Silence became my armor. I smiled when I had to, nodded through their self-congratulations, and kept my head down. It wasn't about swallowing pride. It was about watching, about taking mental snapshots. Because here's the thing, my dad wasn't always like this. Before Carol, he'd show up to my games even after 12-hour shifts. He'd take me out for pancakes just because. But after she came along, it was like my existence was a side project he couldn't be bothered to maintain. I didn't know if it was guilt over moving on after mom or if Carol just filled every spare inch of his brain. But I wasn't his priority anymore. Still, I kept playing the role. I'd ask about work. I'd remember his birthday even if he didn't remember mine. I never asked for money, never made him feel like an ATM. I think that's why, when it mattered, things turned out the way they did. What I didn't know was that he noticed. Maybe not in the way I wanted at the time, but enough to keep track. Enough to remember that, unlike Carol and Chloe, I didn't treat him like a wallet with legs. But before that truth came out, in the most brutal way possible, I had to survive another 2 years of Carol's subtle little power plays, Chloe's entitled smirks, and my dad's absence in moments that should have mattered. And the whole time, I told myself the same thing. Stay quiet. Let them talk. Let them think you're just background noise. Because when you've been underestimated long enough, you start to realize there's power in it. And I was going to use that power. Just not yet. By the time I turned 25, I'd perfected the art of being invisible in my own family. Carol liked it that way. If I didn't speak up, she didn't have to pretend to care. Chloe liked it too. Less competition for Dad's attention, and more space for her to play the perfect daughter act. The problem was, invisibility didn't mean I wasn't there. I saw everything. Like the way Carol forgot to mention my promotion when Dad's friends came over for a barbecue, but made sure everyone heard about Chloe's internship at a fashion magazine. Or how Chloe would borrow Dad's SUV for weekend trips, rack up speeding tickets, and then laugh about how Dad's got it covered. I kept my distance. I had my own place by then. A tiny but decent apartment across town. I worked in logistics for a shipping company. Nothing glamorous, but steady. I was fine not needing anything from him. Truth be told, it was easier. No favors meant no debts. Still, every so often, Carol would find a way to remind me I didn't belong in their little unit. One summer, Dad invited me to a family vacation. His words, not hers. I took the time off, packed, even bought a new pair of swim trunks because he mentioned the hotel had a nice pool. Day before we were supposed to leave, Carol accidentally texted me a photo of the packed car. Just her, Dad, and Chloe's luggage. No room for mine. She followed up with a cheery, "Oh no, we must have gotten wires crossed. Maybe next year?" Dad never called to explain. Moments like that were their specialty. Not big enough to cause an outright fight, but sharp enough to cut. The kind of thing you can't complain about without sounding petty. And I'd lie awake sometimes, staring at the ceiling, wondering if maybe they were right. Maybe I was easy to forget. But every so often I'd catch a flicker of the old Dad. A random call to check in. A small smile when I told him about my new project at work. I held on to those moments like they were lifelines. It made me think maybe, deep down, he still knew I was in his corner, even if he didn't say it out loud. Then, a few months before everything exploded, Carol hosted one of her charity brunches. You know the type. Really just an excuse to show off the house and network with other wives who spoke in hashtags. I stopped by to drop off a box of books I'd promised Dad. He'd gotten into reading What's He History. When I walked in, I saw her at the kitchen island, surrounded by women dripping in jewelry. She was laughing. Full, fake, pageant queen laughter. Josh? Oh, he's our quiet one. Doesn't need much. So independent, never asks for a dime. Unlike some people. She winked, and the table erupted in laughter. I knew exactly who some people meant, but the way she said it, you'd think my existence was a joke to her. I didn't say a word. I just set the books down on the counter, nodded at Dad, who barely met my eyes, and left. That was the day I stopped waiting for him to defend me. What I didn't realize? That was also the day Dad started making his own quiet moves. Carol's favorite sport was control, and Chloe was her star player. By the fall, Chloe had moved back in with Dad, temporarily, after her lease ended. Translation: she blew through her savings on designer bags and overpriced cocktails. Carol spun it like a homecoming, telling everyone how wonderful it was to have her baby girl back under the same roof. For me, it meant one thing: more ammunition for Carol to parade around. Every dinner I attended at their house became the Chloe show. Dad would ask about my week, but before I could get 2 sentences in, Carol would swoop in. Oh, that reminds me. Chloe just got invited to an exclusive networking mixer at the Ritz. You wouldn't believe who she met. And off they'd go. I'd end up pushing food around my plate while Chloe scrolled through her phone, occasionally glancing up to smirk at me. One night stands out. I just got a commendation at work. A legit plaque, my name engraved and everything, for pulling together a massive distribution project ahead of schedule. I figured, fine, maybe if I mention it in passing, Dad will be proud. I told him over dinner, and for a split second I saw it, that flicker in his eyes. That's great, Josh, Carol cut in without missing a beat. Speaking of recognition, Chloe got over 2,000 likes on her last Instagram post. Can you believe that reach? The conversation swerved so hard it might as well have driven into a ditch. Dad didn't circle back to my news. He just nodded along as Chloe launched into a monologue about brand partnerships. I went home that night and put the plaque on my bookshelf without telling another soul in that house. By winter, I'd all but stopped visiting unless Dad specifically asked. But the thing was, he started asking. Little stuff. Could I help him sort through some old papers in the attic? Could I drop by to help fix a stuck window? Whenever Carol was busy and Chloe was out, he'd linger. He'd ask about my job, about my friends. Sometimes he'd share stories about Mom, stuff he hadn't talked about in years. One night, while we were boxing up old files, he found a birthday card I'd made for him when I was 10. Messy handwriting, stick figure drawings. He stared at it for a long time before putting it in his pocket. He didn't say anything about Carol or Chloe, but there was this heaviness in the air, like he'd just remembered something he wasn't ready to say out loud. And then came Christmas. Carol went all out. White lights strung along every banister, a tree that looked like it came out of a department store window. Chloe got a leather tote for work, diamond earrings, and a weekend spa trip. My gift? A novelty mug that said, "World's okayest son." They laughed. I smiled. And in that moment, I knew without a doubt, I wasn't going to have to lift a finger for payback. It was already in motion. The first crack showed at New Year's dinner. Carol had insisted on hosting a small family get-together, which in Carol speak meant 50 people she wanted to impress, and exactly 3 who actually shared DNA with her. I showed up out of obligation, armed with the polite half-smile I'd perfected over the years. The house was buzzing with champagne chatter. Carol floated around in sequins, introducing Chloe to anyone with a business card. Dad sat near the fireplace, smiling when people approached, but not really part of the crowd. I caught him watching me a few times. Not the distracted glance I was used to. He was studying me, like he was weighing something. Halfway through the night, Carol decided to make a toast. She clinked her glass and launched into a speech about family, success, and how proud she was of Chloe's drive and ambition. She even used the word inspirational. Then, without missing a beat, she swiveled toward me. And Josh, well, Josh has always been our quiet rock. Doesn't make waves, never asks for much. We're just so glad he's steady. Steady. Not accomplished, not hardworking, not successful. Steady. The room laughed politely, like it was a compliment. I just sipped my drink, but Dad's jaw tightened. He didn't join the laugh track. After midnight, when the guests thinned out, Dad pulled me aside in the kitchen. "You all right?" he asked, in that low voice you use when you don't want to draw attention. "Yeah, why?" He hesitated, like he wanted to say something more, then shook his head. "Never mind. Just glad you came tonight." A week later, he called me on a Tuesday night, out of the blue. "Josh, you free for dinner?" "Just us." We went to this small steakhouse he used to take me to when I was a kid. No Carol, no Chloe, just Dad and me in a booth with cracked red vinyl seats. Somewhere between the salad and the main course, he leaned in. "You know I see it, right?" I froze. "See what?" His eyes locked on mine. "How they treat you. I'm not blind." For a moment, I couldn't speak. He'd never said anything like that. Not once in over a decade. He didn't elaborate, just went back to his steak like he hadn't dropped a bomb on my chest. But that single sentence stayed with me, because for the first time in years, I realized he had been paying attention. I didn't know it then, but that conversation was the prelude to the moment Carol would least expect, and I would never forget. Update 1. All right, Reddit, buckle in. Because that paperwork dinner? Yeah, it wasn't dinner. It was the first domino. First off, holy hell, I did not expect my inbox to explode like that. Some of y'all had me wheezing. Whoever commented, steady appliance they leave plugged in until it dies, deserves an award. Also, to the 3 separate people who suggested I should accidentally forward Carol a copy of my achievements. I admire your energy, but turns out karma works faster than email. So here's what happened. Dad asked me to come over Tuesday at 6. I show up, half expecting it to be some weird intervention where they tell me to be more involved in family activities, aka smile while Chloe opens another diamond box. Instead, it's just Dad at the table with a stack of folders and a manila envelope. No Carol, no Chloe. He pours us both a drink, whiskey for him, soda for me, and says, I've been doing some thinking and some planning. Now, my dad is not a planning guy. He's the type to buy a snowblower in April because it's on sale. So my brain is already trying to figure out where this is going. He starts going through his will, not just going through it, reading certain sections out loud. The short version? Carol gets some personal items, a small payout to ease transitions, and Chloe gets exactly nothing except a few sentimental trinkets, if she wants them. The rest, the house, the savings, the investments, his share in the family business, goes to me. And then he says the line that's been living rent-free in my head since, for never treating me like a wallet. That's it. That's why. He's been keeping score all these years, just quietly, while I thought I was background noise. I just sat there. I don't even remember what I said. Something like, you don't have to do this. But he cut me off. I want to. I need to know the person who gets this isn't going to see dollar signs instead of me. Here's the kicker. Carol and Chloe have no idea. Yet. And based on how smug she's been lately, I think the reveal might end up being the most satisfying thing I've ever witnessed. I'm not changing a damn thing. I'm just going to sit back, nod politely at brunches, and let that day come. Because if you've ever wondered what pure, poetic justice tastes like, I have a feeling I'm about to find out. I walked out of that meeting with Dad feeling like I'd just been handed a live grenade, except instead of pulling the pin, I was supposed to walk around smiling like nothing had changed. And honestly, I was good at that. Years of Carol's dinner table compliments had trained me in keeping a poker face. The next couple of weeks were a masterclass in self-control. Carol was in full holiday afterglow mode, showing off Chloe's new spa photos on Facebook, talking loudly on the phone about our next big purchase, like she had a stake in Dad's bank account. Chloe was worse, sashaying around in a new coat, dropping hints about moving to a bigger place soon, now that she was settled back home. If they'd had any clue, they wouldn't have been so smug. But that's the thing. People who think they've won don't look for traps. Then one Sunday, Dad invited me over for what he called a family discussion. That was unusual enough, but when I walked in, I knew immediately this wasn't his idea. Carol was in her hostess armor, lipstick perfect, hair sprayed into submission, and Chloe was perched at the counter like she was waiting to be interviewed. Carol dove right in. Josh, your father and I have been talking, and we think it's time you considered a more secure career path, something with room for growth. You're not getting any younger, you know. I didn't answer right away. Just sipped my coffee while she rambled about opportunities and networking and how Chloe's contacts could help me transition. Translation. They wanted me under the same roof, same payroll, same leash. Dad sat back in his chair, watching, not saying a word. When Carol finally stopped for air, I smiled. I'm good where I am, she laughed, this condescending little trill. Well, sometimes you have to think beyond yourself, Josh. This is about family. I almost choked on my coffee. Family? This from the woman who once left me out of a vacation because the SUV didn't have room? But before I could speak, Dad leaned forward. I think Josh's career is just fine, Carol. The look she gave him could have curdled milk, but he didn't back down. The conversation fizzled after that, but I could feel the tension humming in the air. Chloe kept sneaking glances at me, like she was trying to read my face. Carol busied herself in the kitchen, slamming cabinets just a little too hard. I left soon after, my phone buzzing with a text from Dad 15 minutes later. Don't let them get to you. The day's coming. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just waiting for that day anymore. I was looking forward to it. The crack started widening faster than I expected. About 3 weeks after that family discussion, I got a call from Chloe in the middle of a workday. No, hi, no, how are you? Just, hey, can you talk to Dad about helping me with a down payment? Carol says you have influence. Influence. That word sat in my ear like a bad taste. I told her to talk to him herself. She huffed, muttered something about me being weird lately, and hung up. That night, Dad called me. Chloe's been asking for money again. I told her no, she's not happy. I could practically hear the understatement in his voice. The next time I saw them was at a Sunday lunch Carol insisted on hosting. I walked in and instantly felt the static in the air. Chloe was sulking at the table, arms crossed, nails tapping on her phone. Carol was flitting between the oven and the fridge, avoiding eye contact. Halfway through lunch, Chloe joked that Dad was tight-fisted and didn't believe in investing in his kid's future. Dad put his fork down. Investing is one thing, funding bad habits is another. The silence after that was thick enough to chew. And then, because Carol can't stand not having the last word, she laughed and said, "Well, thank God you've got me to balance things out. I always think long-term." I nearly snorted into my water. Long-term? As in diamond necklaces and spa trips? That's when I realized neither of them had the faintest clue about the will. They still thought Dad's money was their safety net, and that ignorance was intoxicating. Update 2. All right, so it happened. The will reading. The big reveal. The moment I've been quietly orbiting for months, and if I'm being honest, it was even better than I pictured. First off, to everyone who messaged me saying, "Please record it," I didn't. Mostly because Dad's lawyer's office is about as fun as a tax seminar, and also because I figured no one needed evidence of the absolute meltdown that was about to go down. Picture this. Me, Dad, Carol, Chloe, and Mr. Lawyer in a nice wood-paneled conference room. Carol's in pearls like she's attending a royal christening. Chloe's wearing sunglasses indoors. Don't ask me why. Probably to look important. The lawyer starts reading. There's the usual legal fluff. A few small bequests. Carol gets a modest cash payout, some jewelry, personal effects. Chloe gets a couple of keepsakes if she wants them. Then he gets to the meat of it. The house, the savings, the investments, Dad's entire stake in the business, all of it, to me. Carol blinked, like she was trying to reboot. Chloe actually laughed at first, thinking it was some elaborate prank. And then Dad spoke, calm, steady, like he'd been rehearsing it for years. "Josh is getting this because he never treated me like a wallet. He respected me enough to stand on his own. That's the kind of person I trust with what I've built." The silence was art. Carol's face went from pale to blotchy red in under 30 seconds. "You can't be serious," she hissed at him, ignoring the fact that the lawyer was still right there. Chloe started demanding specifics. How much? When? Why not her? Dad didn't budge. "This is my decision. It's final." Carol grabbed her bag and stormed out, muttering something about betrayal and family unity. Chloe followed, firing off a string of texts to me so long my phone actually froze. I didn't respond to any of them. Dad and I just sat there for a moment after they left. He didn't look triumphant, just relieved. On the drive home, I realized something. I'd spent years thinking I was invisible to him. Turns out, I'd been the only one he was really watching. And now? Now I get to live rent-free in Carol's head for the rest of her life. I think I'll buy a world's okayest sun mug for my new kitchen, out of spite. The days after the will reading were noisy. Carol blew up my phone first. Angry voicemails about how I'd manipulated Dad, how I'd taken advantage of his age. She even threw in a few digs about my mediocre career, which was hilarious considering she once tried to get me to quit that same job so I could help manage the family's social presence. Chloe went a different route, text after text, starting with pure rage. "This is insane. You don't deserve any of it. You're not even close to family anymore." Then pivoting to fake sweetness, once she realized anger wasn't getting her anywhere. "Hey, maybe we can work something out. Like, split some of it? Bro, come on, I'm still your sister." I didn't answer a single one. By the third day, Carol switched tactics. She showed up at my apartment. No warning, just a knock, and there she was in a camel-colored coat and forced smile. "Josh," she said, like we were starting a civil conversation, "I think we should revisit what happened." I told her we weren't revisiting anything. Dad's choice stood. That's when the mask slipped. She started pacing my living room, raising her voice. "Do you have any idea what you've done to this family? You've embarrassed me. You've humiliated Chloe." I couldn't help it. I laughed. "You've been humiliating me for years, Carol. Guess you finally know what it feels like." She froze, staring at me like I'd just spoken a language she didn't understand. Then she stormed out, muttering something about how I'd regret this. The next week was quieter, except for the little digs I started hearing through mutual acquaintances, Carol telling anyone who'd listen that I'd brainwashed Dad, that I was using his grief over your mother to turn him against them. But Dad wasn't buying it. If anything, he seemed lighter. He'd call me just to check in, sometimes to grab lunch. We even started going through Mom's old photo albums, something he'd never been able to do without shutting down before. And somewhere in those quiet afternoons, I realized the money, the house, the business, they weren't the real win. The real win was that after years of being sidelined, I finally had my dad back. Everything else? That's just the cherry on top. Carol didn't go quietly. About a month after the will reading, she launched her last desperate play, a family meeting at the house. I showed up only because Dad asked me to, and I figured, fine, let her make one last scene before she runs out of steam. When I walked in, Chloe was already there, arms crossed, glaring like I'd stolen her lunch money. Carol was in the armchair like a queen on a throne, a stack of papers in her lap. She started in immediately. Josh, I've been thinking about compromises. Obviously, what your father did was rash, and I'm sure we can find a more fair arrangement. I didn't even sit down. It's not up for discussion. She slid the papers toward me anyway. Some half-baked agreement where I'd sign over part of the inheritance to Chloe in exchange for family harmony. I pushed them back across the coffee table. Not happening. That's when she lost it. Full volume. You ungrateful little parasite. We took you in. We gave you a home. Dad cut her off like a guillotine. Carol, stop. You didn't take him in. He's my son, and I've made my decision. The look she gave him could have shattered glass. You're going to regret this. He didn't even flinch. I haven't regretted it for a second. I don't know if it was the way he said it or the fact that she couldn't rattle him anymore, but Carol's whole posture deflated. She grabbed her bag, hissed something at Chloe, and they both stormed out like a bad weather front clearing the room. When the door shut, Dad just sat back, let out a long breath and said, "Guess that's that." And it was. Since then, the house has been quieter. We've been talking more, cooking together on weekends, even fixing up the old garage into a workshop. Carol and Chloe are still out there, probably spinning some new narrative about how I ruined their lives, but I couldn't care less, because for the first time in over a decade, I'm not background noise. I'm not the afterthought. I'm the one Dad chose, not for what I could take from him, but for what I never asked for in the first place. And that's something no diamond necklace could ever buy.